Thank you for coming to another episode of Breaking Down Buhurt. I'm Sean Roberon, the team captain of the Green Mountain Hermits, which is the melee team for Vermont Armored Combat.
And I'm Colby Thompson, a member of Vermont Armored Combat. And I'm budding interest in the melee team, we'll say. A little bit of fledgling interest there. We'll see where that takes me.
And today, Colby actually was the one who came up with the categories of conversation that we have. So I'm going to be kind of going through the questions that we've kind of came up with for this discussion. First off, you just got back from Italy, which sounded like it was a lot of fun, and congratulations on the engagement.
Well, thank you.
And,
that was a heck of a trip. Been saving up for a while for it. And my partner Ari and I, we went and visited Florence mainly, and then kind of did a couple small cities, Siena and Cortona, about an hour and a half outside in the countryside for both of them. And it was amazing. Just the history in those places, the culture, it's made it hard to come back, I'll be honest. Adjusting has been a little tough.
Yeah, and it was a perfect time for an engagement, a trip like that.
I was over there, and it would kind of happen spontaneously, believe it or not. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do it over here because it seems so, obvious. It's like, oh, obviously you're on vacation. You'll do it while you're on vacation. But there were signs, and it all just kind of worked out.
So you were in Italy, and you went to a museum, you said, and you saw a bunch of really cool armor. You sent our group a bunch of pictures, and one of the things that you wanted to talk about was the differences between historical armor that you saw and what we do in Buhurt, in armored combat sports, and noticing differences between those two, and in between those two categories. And I was curious if you could elaborate on that.
Sure. Yeah, so the museum I went to is called the Stiber Museum, and it's basically an eccentric, 19th century rich guy. So he inherited a bunch of wealth, and so he just had an interest in armor and weapons of war, and so he just started this collection, and it grew into this massive. It's huge. There's hundreds upon hundreds of different helmets. And they have tons of mannequins that are made.
And different cultures.
Different cultures. They've got, I don't know the exact phrases super well for the different areas, but it's obviously European, I understand. And then they have some Japanese and Chinese. Then just what you would call Eastern armor. So I'm guessing that's sort of like Islamic armor. Maybe they had some kind of Russia era too. So it's just basically the swath of kind of Europe, of Asia and Europe, just everything in between.
Yeah.
He had examples of armor, and it was just mind-blowing the amount of stuff where I feel like I know Worcester had an armory a while ago, a museum, and it was probably relatively small. And maybe you get to see 10 mannequins of knights or something. But here it was just 10 is just the corner of one room. They had so many helmets and shields and swords and everything that they would have a glass case about the size of this table just stuffed with different 15th century cavalry helmets. So this is the most knightly looking knight helmet you can picture. And there's not even any illumination in this one cabinet. It's just this is one corner of one room, and we have 30 more displays like this, just kind of put places because there's so much stuff we don't even know what to do with it. So basically for a nerd like me who has an interest in the armor side of armored combat, it just was a kid in a candy store. It was amazing.
Right.
Arya gave me 3 hours there, so that was very generous. We were there's two of us and then maybe 2 other small groups of 3 or 4 people, so we had the place to ourselves. But what I did notice, getting to the point of the question with the difference between the armors, was specifically how small a suit of armor looks just the whole perception of the armored knight. For example, I'm looking at when we're at our events, and for anyone who's seen us fight, generally when we put on our gear, whatever, if you're 6 foot tall, then you put your armor on, suddenly you look like you're 6'5". And, if your shoulders go out to here, suddenly they go out to here. Just everything about you is bigger.
Right. You're quite bulky inside of these kits.
We kind of look like these little titans almost.
Yeah.
I mean, and when I first started and I was squiring, kind of helping out, I was looking at all the people fighting, being it just added to the mystique. When the person, whoever it was putting on their kit, I'd be like, wow, look at him now, like in armor, just you're just so big. You're just like, I want to do that. I want to be that person. Definitely like but I'm next to these full size mannequins of historical armor. They didn't have a lot of recreated stuff. They did have things that were touched up a little bit, that were repaired. But by and large, they were the real deal, mostly from the 15th to 17th century. So it wasn't exactly this age stuff that we have. It was a little bit later in the development of armor, but still like full plated knights, everything that you kind of picture. And yeah, it's just like, helmets were smaller. The leg armor, which for us, I just picture that big piece that wraps around your thigh, and it just all seemed much more form fitting. They just seem skinnier, as opposed to what we have, again, like big and hulking.
And is that because I know like Sam has talked about like samurai.
Yeah.
When you go a little bit further into the history, I think he's talked about how things seem to get a little bit smaller. But I'm curious, like how bulky someone was in like 13th century,
right? And they
versus 15th, 16th.
They didn't have a ton of examples of older than the 15th century. They had one lonely 14th century knight, which is the style that generally you and I have our armor, and Will's armor is kind of styled after that, where it's mostly plate armor, maybe a coat of plates, the brig instead of a cuirass, and some sort of a clap visor like bassinet helmet.
What was the size of their helmet? That one.
Yeah, much like I said, much more proportional. They had some that were definitely big honkin' helmets, but I feel like they fit a lot tighter to the face, almost like our member Michael got a helmet that was a little too close fitting to his head, that it was kind of dangerous for what we were doing for him. And they were much more like that proportionally. But yeah, it's just overall everything, just kind of smaller, less clunky, and maybe that has to do with the keeping our bodies as safe as they can be with what we're doing.
Right.
Where we add on maybe the extra weight and the extra thickness of metal and the extra padding underneath. But yeah, by and large, it seems smaller. And then another thing I noticed too, and this will probably get your gears going, so just watch yourself here. I don't want you to get you too upset.
Yeah.
But there's a tour guide who was just in some of the rooms. They had some people working who would, if you had any questions, you could say, I'm curious about this piece. Could you tell me about it? And she was differentiating between a knight's war set of armor. So she had someone who was well known in Florence, his set of armor on display. And she's like, this is his war set that we have here. But on the horse over there is his parade and tournament armor from like towards the end of his life. So it would be like, generally the difference was all the gilding and like the gold work with the little etchings, parade armor, tournament armor, and then more plain.
This is what you would actually fight in.
This is what you'd be fighting in,
right.
And they were still beautiful to look at, and I mean, very ornate compared to, again, what we're using, where we have very simple things, but definitely not like the etched little pictures. But what I took away from that was, for tournaments and for parades, the knights who are participating generally would like go to great lengths to make themselves as showy and as flashy as possible, because it was just
like maybe painting.
And so that's the thing. There's a high amount of like, from what I could tell from this museum, there was a lot of personalization of armor, and they didn't have any painted stuff. Obviously, there's reasons that would be difficult to last hundreds of years, for the paint to stay on. But they had an example of a breastplate that had a cloth covering that was like riveted to it. That was like this kind of red velvet with all these gold like lacing and like designs on it. Almost like a painting, just on a breastplate, something that I didn't know happened. And so I'm just curious. It's too bad that there's not more examples, because I know that a lot of people would like to kind of get away from the Black Knight, the White Knight, and have more color, and just kind of have more ability to
have fun
and get a little bit more creative
with the aesthetic of their armor. Be personal about their kit.
Right. And so that was definitely something that I also took away. And the last thing that I want to harp on this is also the variety and just all the little ways that something that you might see is like, okay, we have this one helmet. We have a cavalry helmet, which that's one that might have like the fin up top and it has the two eye slits and the big kind of nose piece that comes out like this. You know, with the beak, the sort of like knight helmet you'd picture, you know, from like a kid's book. They had dozens and dozens of those helmets there, but almost all of them were so different. You know, the eyes would be slanted a different way. They'd be further apart. They'd be smaller. There'd be breathing holes on this side, none on this side or this side. The fin would be different. You know, there might be like all these little tiny details that, you know, overall would just make them all very individual helmets. So they would be recognizable. So it's not like copy and paste the same thing over and over again. Yeah. And so I just thought, again, that like just the craftsmanship of the Armour was, even down to the individual type of helmet in the same category, was very different.
That's pretty cool.
And I just thought that was neat because it's nice to see personalization from that sort of level too.
Right.
Yeah, those were my big takeaways. Also that it was just completely awesome, and it was like €10 to go in. So if anyone's ever going to Italy, Stiber Museum in Florence, or go to the Met in New York City, apparently they have a massive collection. That's my next one on my list.
All right. So next category, finances of fighting, choosing to travel, to fight, to stay home, and equipment purchases. What is it that you want to talk about? Because like everything there makes a whole lot of sense to me when you're trying to figure out what you're going to spend your money on.
I think especially when you're a newer person getting into the sport, the immediate thing is I just need to get my gear. You know, I need to put the big financial input into kitting myself out so I can participate. And but I'm finding now that I've got about a year in steel in my own kit that's like, okay, I have my stuff now. And there's upgrades that just seem like they keep happening.
Yep.
At things that I'm like, these gloves, I don't like these. I want something better. And, you know, there's always that. And so
it's inevitable.
Yeah, want to tame down the monkey brain if you can. But then there's like, okay, well, now I have stuff and I want to go to events. So, you know, I traveled last year to Carnage, and going down there was like incredibly fun. And just like a great experience as a fighter. But, you know, the whole trip was probably about $1,000 to do that, you know, between the hotel room and the car rental and the airport and all that stuff. And then registering for the event, which was the cheapest part of the whole thing. Checked luggage just kills you, though.
Yep.
Yeah, so anyway, we were talking with Will at practice, and that's what made me think about this, was Will was asking if I was going to do any national events this year, and how they're prioritizing with their family. Maybe this is going to be a big push year, and then kind of bring it back a little bit after this, because you know, money is time, and time is a resource, and so if you're spending it all on this one thing, you're taking it away from, you know, other things you might do with that. So yeah, that was kind of what I wanted to hit on. It's difficult to do it all. It's difficult to do it all.
Yeah, like I had the opportunity to go to Germany this year. That could have happened next month. But I chose not to. Not just because of the paint job thing, but just money.
Yeah.
It's just expensive. And it's also my first year still of being in kit, and I felt maybe it's not necessary for me as a first year to dive right into some international competitions. But I get that. I get that concern, having to figure out what it is that you're going to dedicate your funds towards. Whether you're going to want to travel a lot to a bunch of tournaments, or whether, like, I feel a little bit closer to this now, and that I feel like I want to stick to a little bit more local for me. And in the Northeast, that's really easy.
Yeah.
We have so many opportunities to play with so many other groups that are directly around us that you don't need to spend a bunch of money to have a good time in this sport, at least for someone in my situation, because of all the different groups that are around here. And I'm not as driven towards wanting to get that medal at certain tournaments, but that's just for me. Like, everybody's different. And that's me also prioritizing what I want to focus on when it comes to how I'll enjoy the sport. And that's where I'm making my choices when it comes to money.
Yeah.
But I get that concern.
It definitely makes sense. And I think we've got, you know, some folks who are coming up who are getting their steel together, and that'll be something that, and it's something that I'm dealing with this year as well. I'm going through a career change, phasing out of one thing and trying to get trained up on something else. And so it's like, you know, I do want to go. I'd love to do Carnage again. I'd love to do some other events that are bigger. But I just don't know if it's smart. And now I'll make tons of dumb decisions anyway. Like, and I have like an amount that I can make with Buhurt stuff. Mm-hmm. I think I've crossed that threshold, and I shouldn't make any more dumb decisions with my money for the rest of this financial year, until I know that I'm going to have another job lined up. Yeah. But yeah, it's difficult when you have something you love and you want to put so much time into it, to kind of hold back and be like, I guess I shouldn't go to the big fun party that everyone's going to have where you can meet all the other cool people who are doing this, because it's a whole weekend and it's a whole
financial commitment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually might go well with the next question I asked a little bit further down, that Mike had proposed to me about practice.
Yep.
Yeah.
I remember that. We'll get there. Well, let's talk about that before we talk about the one before that then.
Sure.
It kind of leads in the practice versus events.
Yeah.
You said that you were having a conversation with Mike, one of the other members of VAC, when we were at practice yesterday. What was that about?
Yeah. So we were chatting just as we're filling up our water balls about how how practice is something we all look forward to all week long, and it's just like this something right after practice is over, you're already looking forward to next Sunday. I definitely feel that way, and I know a couple of our other members feel that way.
For sure.
And so he mentioned that he's like, I actually think I like practice more than I like going to actual events. It's just a different feeling. And so I'm curious what you might think what that feeling is, because for me, it's like I've never thought about like, practice is, in some ways can be a better time than going to the event.
It's not just preparation.
Yeah.
You can view a practice as its own thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, I do this to get to that event. No, that is an event and that is an event. And then where is the fulfillment?
Yeah.
Where do you find your fulfillment in this sport?
I think there's a lot to be said about, if you can only make a couple events, but you can do a lot of your club practices wherever they are in the world. I'm finding it's a great, and overall just a great use of my time and a huge boost mentally for me. Physical health and mental health, just to get together with a bunch of friends, a group of friends who's growing seemingly every couple of weeks. And we just get to do something fun together, something fun and active, and working towards a goal. And whatever, and it's just really become like a major staple of my week now. And I hope that other people are finding that out with the groups that they participate in. You feel that way with VAC?
Yes. I always look forward to Sunday. I always look forward to when we can get together as a group again and be able to play with each other. I do really look forward to events. That's usually just because it's me being able to see some of the people that I normally don't get to run into, like the Knights Hall people. I don't see them every single week, so it's nice when I do get to go down there and be able to hang out with them and see how they're doing and catch up and then do some fights, because if you never fight anybody else, you're only ever getting used to fighting those particular people that you're playing with in your club. So there's definitely growth to be had by fighting different people. But when it comes to my fulfillment in this sport, it's not coming from a place of sport accomplishment, of like I need to be first. Like that's not where my fulfillment is coming from. So I definitely get what Mike is saying about finding that fulfillment, finding that accomplishment, just being in the moment with those people and playing. You have plenty of opportunities during that time to get and steal, especially now. Like when the group was first forming, when I first joined in, there were very few of us. And so the opportunities that we had to actually do a lot of duels and get opportunities really going up against each other and like growing as fighters in that sense, very minimal.
Yeah.
But we've grown to a point in which we actually have an assortment of fighters to be able to play with and learn from and to adapt to and learn to fight against and grow with. I think that is just as fulfilling as going to an event.
Yeah.
Like I think that community and that the opportunities that we have as our group, that there's plenty there for that to be all you really need.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
every person is different. Like everybody's brain is hardwired different ways when it comes to how we perceive games and things that we find fun. Some people's brains are completely hardwired to be focused on things like accomplishments. Like that's why in video games, for instance, they put or even any type of game, why they put in things like accomplishment things that you don't really get anything for. Just you get like a little badge that just says you killed 100 so and so things inside the game. Congratulations.
Sure. Yeah.
Some people's brains are very hardwired to want those accomplishments. That's how they view like growth. Like I've done this, so I've won that. I did that, and there's like a joy in that of like that next thing to beat. And then for some people, it's completely about a social dynamic of wanting to feel like they belong.
Yeah.
And so one person's fulfillment could just be the fact that they're showing up to Vermont Armored Combat and they look around and say, I have people that care about me. I'm fulfilled. Like that could be it. Like, and that's all some people need.
Yeah.
And so it's just every individual is different, and we've all got our different ways in which we have fun in life and our different ways in which we find fulfillment. And if somebody doesn't understand that, it's too bad for them.
This will bring us to our last bit.
Yep. I said that as a segue. So now let's get into your public perception.
Yeah. Redux.
Yes.
Take 2. Or take 123.
Yes. Public perception and the way in which we are perceived by people who aren't part of armored combat.
Yeah, and I'll be the first to let people know that I bristle quickly, and I've got not a shallow temper. It's just I don't want to say triggered, but I get triggered. You know, it's just something about it to me.
I bristle over bullying.
Okay,
and
so then
so it bothers me when you tell me these things because I dislike it if I see other people getting hurt for just liking the things that they like.
Yeah, and so I guess you know, I'm sure that we've all felt it at events every once in a while. Mm-hmm. You know, most of the time, and I love that in Brattleboro now specifically when we're doing gallery walk. Like I've got friends of mine who play the open mic circuit or something, or just friends in town who I'll grab a drink with or something, or we do things together. And they might be watching the crowd, and I hear, "Go Colby," you know, and you can hear like when someone lands a solid headshot with the shield punch, the buckler.
Oh!
You know, even though like we're both like ting, like okay, you know, like. But when you see the helmet spin on someone's head a little bit and the chainmail's flying around and people are like, oh, you know, like, is he okay? It kind of creates a different thing. But then there's also, you know, I don't usually encounter this when I'm at an event where people are watching us fight, but it's usually just in conversation where it's like, oh, so you dress up in your costumes and you do what, you know? And so there was an example of that just over like a week or so ago. I was in one of those situations where a friend of mine was talking to a person I know, and I just heard kind of that little dig of like, oh no, it's not really like just dressing up for like play acting, you know, he puts a lot of time into going to the gym and working out, and he's really, you know, come a long way with physical fitness all because of this. And it's like, well, you do realize you're just dressing up in an armor, was kind of the reaction. You know, and so I overheard it. I bristled because it just seems like such a way to downplay the importance of what this has become for me, both like on the fitness journey of it, and then the skill level of it, the difficulty of it, and also just you know the brutality of it when you're. You know, certainly when you're watching some fighters who are gassed out, you're tired, and the swings are just looking like, oh, come on, you know, like, look at that. I've been there. But when
We've
you've
all
got
slugged our
when
way
you've got
through
two
it.
people who are, just coming out for their first fight, and they're people who've been training and who can throw a punch and who can swing hard, like it's scary to be on the other end in that kit sometimes, And I think anyone who would try it would be like, oh, this is real in that moment, not like, okay, we're gonna like tap lightsabers. You know what I mean?
Right. But even if it was just tapping lightsabers, that's the point of this conversation, though.
Yes.
Is that everybody has their different things that they find fulfillment in life. And if you've got a problem with that, that is your problem.
And
Like
so
it's-
for me, I
right.
guess I have that the perception is a weak point for me. I hate how it kind of is like playing dress up and we're just medieval times is, oh, so you guys do medieval times, and there's just had so many chats like that over the last couple of years, and it gets tiring to explain it, and I'm getting better at answering those, those questions or kind of steering those conversations around. But it's like you look at the people, what the AMMA folks are doing down in Nashville, and like with the cage fights and everything, like they have people who are chipping teeth and who are, falling down from a knockout, in their steel, like, and they're selling out this like stadium now. It's badass. It's really cool, and it's brutal. And so it's just, it bothers me to be misclassified.
And I get that. And it's that importance that you said earlier. It's that importance that it has for you.
Yeah.
And that's important to you. And my problem is not necessarily when people say like, oh, so is this like medieval times? Or, oh, is this LARP? Or like, oh, what's your costume like? I can tell there's just a place of ignorance that they're coming from. They just don't know what they're talking about, and they're trying to figure that out. And once I educate them on it, then most people are usually like, oh, neat. Or that's interesting. Or it's just like, had no idea it existed. And it's just kind of like, cool. Like I've helped you like learn a little bit through this experience.
Yeah, 100% agree with you on that.
Versus what you just said that happened to you. That's just someone being a bully.
Yeah. Yeah,
And-
when someone knows the story.
Right.
They've heard the explanation or whatever.
But then they feel like just taking a dig at things like that. That's just someone being mean. And that's my trigger. Like I've got a problem with bullies. Like I've dealt with it a lot my whole life. And so if we're adults and you feel the need to verbally assault me, basically, like you feel the need to degrade something that I care about just because it's something that you don't necessarily care about, I don't know. There's something wrong with that person who feels like as an adult they need to do something like that inside a conversation where no one was projecting their passion onto them.
Right.
It's not like you were standing there saying like, it's the coolest thing in the world, right? You got to agree with me. They'd be like, I would understand someone being like, whoa, buddy, it's like just costumes or something. Like they might feel a little bit like they're getting it shoved down their throat. And so now they're being a little defensive. But that wasn't happening.
Yeah.
It was their partner telling someone how proud they even were of their partner for what they were doing. And then that person trying to make what you do sound bad to your own partner.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird.
There's a weakness there in a person on an emotional level who feels that they need to do something like that. And that is my perception of them.
So everyone listen to Sean, as because I'm sure, for newer folks, you might see, if you get involved with us, you start coming to us, what we're doing, our practices. I bet a lot of your friends will be like, "That's awesome. I kind of want to learn." But you might have over, some family meals or some folks who just don't get it at all. And I mean, it's what can you do?
That's all that, you shrug your shoulders and you say like, I'm sorry, it's not something that it sounds fun to you. It's something that I love doing. And you can at least respect that.
Yeah. It's always nice to, if you could have an example, just find that one fight that you've seen somewhere on YouTube or whatever that you're like, that one was like really badass. Like that's serious looking, and be like, okay, this is actually what I do. And you could just bring that up. Just keep that link saved someplace. Like, oh, you think it's, whatever. So clearly, that's a weakness of mine.
But it's coming from somebody else's insecurities.
Right.
Like, they're hurting you because of their own problems. And that is something that I will always keep telling people, especially when you're growing up, like kids, that you're going to get picked on, and it's because somebody else is trying to make sure that they're at the top of the pecking order. It's not because they are the best. It is simply because they are trying to make sure that they are perceived as the best. That's it. All right. So the last two things that we can go over real quick today. July 12th, myself and I believe one or two others from VAC are planning to go down to Ye Old Commons in Charlton, Mass. To fight alongside people at the Knights Hall in some night fights that are happening. And that's why I've got this with me today, is to show what I will be fighting with during one of those fights. I'm part of the headsman with the Knights Hall, which is their secondary team. Even though I'm the captain of VAC's team, I'm a member of this team. And with the Knights Hall, you're not allowed to use a two-handed axe until you've earned your axe. Like, that's how they coin it. And earning your axe means I have to either take part in a chapter match, which is just a full day's worth of fighting between two teams in melees, and you have to have a higher ratio in which you've knocked people down than times in which you've been knocked down, or you have to take part in a 5-round night fight, which we've talked about before, of what a night fight is. And so it's a very aggressive fight, and you're expected to swing. Like, you're trying to knock someone down. But the night fight, you're only allowed to bring in basically this: a pickaxe handle with no weapon, no head on it or anything, and my job is to win that fight.
Yeah.
Just to win a 5-round fight.
And so 5 rounds is no joke.
Yep.
5 rounds is no joke.
It's very exhausting. So I'm going down there. I just wrapped this today, so then it would try to hold up as best it can once it actually starts swinging. And I'll be doing that on the 12th, trying to earn my axe as part of the headsman.
And the rest of VAC will be rooting for you.
Yeah,
we'll be hoping that you come home with an axe head for that thing.
Thank you. And then the only other thing that we've got to talk about is the fact that we're looking at trying to get VAC a hall.
Yeah.
We've got a building. We're interested in it. We've got about a little bit more than half of the money per month committed to already between the members of our group and a few sponsors that we've already found. And that's what we're looking for, actually. We're looking for businesses who are looking for advertisement, or businesses that are looking for organizations that they care about in the area, or individuals that find this fascinating enough that they want to help make our program grow to the point in which we have a venue where people can come and participate in fights, watch fights, all of that type of stuff, and have a much more well-rounded space for us to train in and to bring new members in. I know that some of us are also interested in running some youth programming, which could happen for armored combat. A lot of soft kit training for youth, and that's something that I know I'm interested in doing. That's kind of all of my experience in life has been with youth when it comes to the programming that I've done.
And we get asked all the time at events. Like my kid who's 8 or 9 or whatever loves swords, loves knights and armor. Like,
can they do it?
Can they do it?
And we're like, we're not going to put you in this situation, but
right.
We've got soft kit stuff that we can train you in, and so you have experience.
So it is possible, and
right.
So the gears are slowly turning with that. And
right.
We have a willing teacher, but we just need a space, because with the space you need to have the gear.
Right.
And then obviously, there's a lot that goes into that.
Right. And so we're interested in running some youth programming and interested in being able to host events, both inside and outside. And the space in question has both an indoor space that we could build a list in. We wouldn't be able to do any pole arm. It is too short for like a pole arm to be swung overhead. Mm-hmm. But then there is an outdoor space right outside of the building that we would want to build an outdoor list in to be able to have melees and pole arm fights be able to happen out there.
If we can pull it off, it'll be a huge growth for the team, mm-hmm. And for the Vermont area. Mm-hmm. the Nashua group is like a major hub for all their fighting. And so we all have that, the 2-hour drive or an hour and a half drive to get down to there to those events. But to have like people who want to come and watch events, if we can grow that little community too and kind of broaden our own pool of people who are interested.
Right. And we're keeping our distance enough away from Nashua when it comes to when we would host events and where this venue is, that I don't believe that it's like competition. We're not competition for the Knights Hall, and we're not trying to be when it comes to setting up a venue like this. Any type of events that we would host, we would 100% make sure that they're not overlapping with anything the Knights Hall is doing. We don't want to try to do anything like that. We are friends with them, and we want it to be something where we're bouncing off of each other and helping both groups grow and be able to host events together even, and being able to have the Knights Hall folks come up to us and us go down to them. Like that, I want to make that very clear, that there is no desire to like take over space, take over interests from other people.
Yeah. I think with the 2 hour, just because it's a Scuttney, Vermont, right?
Right.
Yeah, from Scuttney to Vermont to Nashua is probably 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I fighters are probably we are driving 2 hours to go to compete. I don't think audience members, unless they're going with their friend who fights, are committing 2 hours to go down.
We're hitting a different demographic entirely of audience for the most part.
Mostly the biggest thing will be it could be a space for us to expand our team.
Yep.
Also to use in the winter months. Having the goodwill of our space we have right now is kind of, it's just so long as we're permitted there.
Right.
So it would be nice. It could be a real boon for our club.
Right. So then we're not worried about whether we're ever going to have a space needed for the amount of people that we're growing with.
And there's also a lot of folks who are like, you get your 1 day a week of training. And that's kind of a bummer to be able to get up to maybe
2-3 days.
If we could do 2-3 days, that'd be awesome. If we can get that second day in there a week, it would really accelerate growth, I think, for people.
Yeah. So if you're interested, reach out to me, worldunderwonder@gmail.com, or reach out to us over our Facebook, Vermont Armored Combat, and I'll be able to communicate back with you about that. We'd be able to set up something through Venmo, or if you were interested in just donating through a check, we have sponsorship letters that shows advertisement and the benefits of doing that. You kind of become a patron in that sense. Through sponsorship, you get a certain number of tickets that you would be able to use to events that we're doing each month. So there's benefits to it rather than just being an angel donator. That's it. So thank you very much for watching another episode, and see you next time.